Hey, David, thank you so much for being one of our guests as we talk about the very fascinating topic of economic injustice. So, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Huge honor. Love the work that you guys are doing, and it's a big honor to be a part of it.
Thank you. So, I would love to jump right in. You are someone who is doing, academic work around economic justice. You also live in West Charlotte, which, there's been Harvard studies around where they call it literally the tale of two cities. I came to West Charlotte and I got to see it with my own eyes and visit and see the work that you're doing. My experience was that what's happening in West Charlotte is this incredible, very tangible demonstration of essentially crazy economic injustice in a way that you literally cannot deny because it's right in front of you. Can you tell us a little bit about the story of West Charlotte and what is happening there in the realm of kind of economic injustice?
Yeah, absolutely. The University of Harvard and the University of California at Berkeley did a study, and probably about 5 years ago now, that studied upward mobility in large cities across the country. And Charlotte has like really enjoyed the reputation as a top 10 city to live in America. Great affordability, but also accessibility to really well-paying jobs. Really clean city, great place to raise a family. I live here. I love being here. But the city got a really big black eye because they ended up being noted as the 50th city out of 50 large cities in our country for upward mobility, which means that a child that is born into poverty in Charlotte, North Carolina, one of the best cities to raise a family in the world, in my opinion, and many others, has a 4% chance of making it out of poverty and getting into the upper levels of economic opportunity. When I started to hear that, it was like, it just really messed with me. It wasn't my experience of being in this city and raising my family in this city. I've always said that this is such a great place to raise a family. But when you start thinking about kids that don't have that same opportunity, it really started to bother me, which led me to a doctoral program studying the cyclical patterns of generational poverty. And I have interest both vocationally and academically in this now, and it's something that being able to live it out with friends, but also to study it and the systemic inequities has been something that's been really eye-opening for me.
It's amazing. So when I came, you guys drove me down a street and you told me about this when we first met, where literally on one, like quite literally on the one side of the street are townhomes that are worth, $250,000, and there's all these gentrified families there, and it's white and it's, upwardly mobile. And then literally on the other side of the street is essentially obvious poverty, people of color. I mean, the visual of that is such a stunning demonstration of the divide between rich and poor and the divide between privilege and not. Can you talk to us a little bit, tell other people who are listening a little bit more about that? Because it was very profound to see it in real life.
I mean, you viscerally feel it when you drive down that road. Harvard started to refer to Charlotte as the tale of two cities. And I always say that if you just want to see that and feel it viscerally, just go down Berry Hill Road. Because Berry Hill Road is a dividing road in the Camp Green neighborhood, which was a historic World War I campsite that became a neighborhood that over time became a predominantly Black neighborhood. Now, developers over the last 10, 15, 20 years have started to eye West Charlotte as an opportunity zone, they would call it, for development, because it's only about a half mile, 1 mile outside of our main core of our city center. And so they assembled, I believe it was somewhere around 200 lots. And then once they got that last lot, they leveled the whole neighborhood. So Camp Green was literally cut in half. A lot of the families, which were predominantly people of color, were displaced down the road that we call Freedom Drive here. And now literally off the backside of the property where I work every single day is $400,000 homes over one tree line. And then over the other tree line is been historically one of the highest poverty neighborhoods in all of North Carolina. That's changing now, and a lot of the work that we're doing now is trying to allow neighbors who have been living in that neighborhood for generations to be able to stay in the neighborhood, because now the rest of that neighborhood is now viewed as, while it's still one of the higher poverty and higher crime areas in our city, it's now viewed as some of the most valuable real estate in the city. And so right now, it is very normal to drive down Berry Hill Road and see a $500,000, $400,000 house directly across the street from a house that maybe would go for $60,000 or $70,000. But now that house, even in the past year, is now sitting next to a leveled lot that is getting ready to build another $500,000 house. So now it's jumped Berry Hill. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is trying to create opportunities for families who want to stay in the neighborhood to have access to education and employment, healthcare, and housing, which is the stuff that I've been studying in my doctoral program.
So this could go in so many directions, but I have two things that I feel like I actually want to take this conversation in, which is different than what you and I said we would talk about. So
that's fine.
We're
free.
Come with me. When we first met, we were at a CCDA conference, and the work of CCDA talks about this idea of the difference between restoration and gentrification, and that what the common model of development is. And this is a complex and important conversation for business owners to think about, because we have an innate idea that development, that making something better, means we go in, we get rid of what's gross and not nice and ugly and what we feel is not good, and we build something shiny and brand new, right? That's the typical real estate model and business model, really. And what CCDA talks a lot about is the idea of community restoration, that you make the community better from the inside out so that the people who are from there can stay. And so when you think really specifically about, let's say, real estate development, where there's so much, there's literal tax credits to go and build new things in poor neighborhoods, but so often that doesn't help the neighborhood. It just displaces people who are from there further out because they can't afford to stay in their own neighborhood. What can you say about the complexity of that equation? Real estate development. I mean, we could talk for probably 12 days about just this, but do you have any initial thoughts about that?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. I think that first we have to, get a good solid definition of what better means. When we make a neighborhood better, a lot of times that means newer buildings and, quite frankly, more white people. And that's something that is very offensive, to be totally honest with you. And that's what a lot of people think of. They think safer, they think newer, shinier buildings, and more folks from the dominant culture. And so the thing that I would say there also, as I've just dipped my toes into something very controversial,
yes, I'm here
is that also, I think that better means a robust, diverse community in my mind, which means that I actually don't think that all gentrification is bad. There's a really great book called How to Kill a City. A friend of mine named Peter Moskowitz wrote it, embedded himself into multiple neighborhoods across the country that were gentrifying. And a community can become safer, which I think we all would agree would be better, while also leaving room for people that have lived there for generations. And so there has to be really nuanced conversation about what does affordable housing look like? What does mixed income housing looks like? I actually think that as neighborhoods get more investment into them, it does become quote unquote better. And so I would encourage business people to look into those neighborhoods, to look into neighborhoods that have an opportunity for investment, but to have a benevolent heart as they are thinking about those neighborhoods. Because to me, better isn't just a higher tax base or grocery stores that now are willing to come into a neighborhood. A lot of these places are food deserts. They don't have grocery stores because they don't feel like there's enough money there. And so there has to be investment into historically high poverty communities. And I encourage all business owners to think about expanding into those areas, but to have a heart for the folks that have been living there for so long. And so that's a lot of the work that we've been doing. I would kind of end those brief. I mean, you're just scratching the surface here, you know, on a quick thing here. But I would end that little segment there with one of our neighbors actually said, I never said that I didn't want a grocery store or retail stores or speed bumps in my neighborhood or a safer community that is policed with equity. What I'm saying is that I want to be able to stay once it all arrives.
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
if you just let that sink in for a moment, the humanity of that and the humanity of realizing like that people are losing and communities are losing literally the like the framework of what it was built on. People view these as like, I always view these communities as like, you know, if you go to a theme park, they would draw me with a little bit of a wider nose. You know, I come from a Filipino family, and then a little bit more of a receding hairline that my hat is covering up right now. And it's a caricature. And I think that in high poverty communities, what they do is they give a caricature of crime, and they give a caricature of poor families that can't get it together. And the news starts to exacerbate those things. And all we ever see is a caricature. But I'm going to tell you, like, I'm a lot better and I'm a lot more nuanced than that drawing that a theme park would do about me. There's a lot more layers to me, and there's a lot more layers to these communities. I spend a lot of time in this community and go to the neighborhood meetings, and what I've seen is beauty all over the place. I think there's such a beautiful sense of community, a beautiful sense of family and of commitment to each other. There's a hustle that is such an entrepreneurial spirit in these communities. And so I would just say to all the business folks that would be listening to this, you know, figure out what that looks like to be a benevolent business owner. Don't, you know, I'm not against capitalism. I mean, I come from a business family, from an entrepreneur's home. I would say just have a benevolent heart as we go towards building our businesses and stronger businesses. I think that anybody that would be listening to this would agree that, you know, going after, you know, great business practices, go for it. But how does that mom who's got these kids in that neighborhood that said that, how do we create systems and strategies that leave room for mixed income housing efforts and income-based housing programs, which is what we are trying to bring to West Charlotte.
So, okay, I love this. Yes, thank you. Agreed. One of the things, I know, one of the things that we have become very passionate about at Silver Lining is that business has to become a tool for justice. That this idea that businesses just make a bunch of money and all we worry about is profit. And then when we're rich enough, we start writing charity checks, right? And then nonprofits and ministries and governments, they figure out the problems. But that there's this line between that is so ridiculous on like every level. And that, to your point, it's not that business has to choose to either come in and overtake or not do anything at all, but business can be a tool for justice and everyone can win. The business can win, the community can win. Like that is a very possible solution. So my last question I have for you is going to be, we're just going to stay in the world of controversy for a while. My last question for you is that as I talk to business leaders about these topics, right? The idea that business is a tool for justice, that we have a responsibility to use our privilege to actually even the playing field, not to milk it for all it's worth and leverage it so that we get richer, but to actually figure out how we win together. You know, of course, there's a wonderful group of human beings in the world who really agree with that. And there's a lot of people who are really wonderful human beings, but do not inherently agree that we are privileged, right? Those of us who are privileged, right? Who come from a more lucky set of circumstances, and who really struggle with the idea that business could be a tool for justice. So if we just let's just talk about privilege as our last thing. I think that's a really, really hard thing for a lot of people to reconcile. And certainly as business owners, right, the insult of privilege is, well, no, wait, I work really hard. And so
Yeah.
And I work really hard, and I'm privileged. I come from a family that loves me. I come from Canada, where I got an affordable education. I don't have a trust fund. I didn't come from wealth, but I come from privilege. I can't deny that. What would you say to our fellow white privileged people who come from good families, who struggle with this idea that, no, wait, I'm not privileged. Like, I don't have a responsibility in this equation. I work hard and I do my thing and I've earned what I have, and that's the end of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say that, that we learn to be defensive rather than remaining curious. And so I think that a lot of the work that I do is pairing folks that have grown up with, quote unquote privilege, with folks that feel like they've been left out or maybe pushed to the edges and to the margins and not had the same opportunity. I would say that that if we can encourage folks, if I was sitting with 5 business owners and the men and women that were around that table, the thing that I would ask them to do is to lay down their defenses and maybe just start by picking up a book. Something like Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and really just start looking at, instead of being like defensive, just a humble posture of just learning. And like when I read Michelle Alexander's book, it talked a lot about the prison system and some of the inequities there. And all of a sudden, like I had to read it and then stop. I had to literally repent a few times, like during the reading of it, because I felt bad that I just didn't know that there is an imbalance even in our justice system. And I think that that I would say the work that I'm trying to do is not to try and make folks of means feel bad. It's to try and level out the playing field and say there's brilliance all around. There is brilliance in every community. And whether or not we think we're privileged or we're not, if we just start looking at facts and equitable access to different things, why are some communities continually left out? Like, I just think that we have lost our curiosity, and in the vitriol of all of this cultural stuff that we have going on right now, we're quick to want to fight for our position instead of ask ourselves the same instinctive questions that made people really good business owners, that made them really good entrepreneurs. Is we remain curious and we saw things and we're saying, man, that is an excellent opportunity for me to be able to, to jump into that market. Well, where is that same type of curiosity as it relates to human beings who are all created in the image of God, in my opinion, and all of us share the same DNA and the same things flowing through our veins, yet there's a huge inequitable imbalance toward, if we just call it like we see it, towards historically a white expression of the business world and a white expression of the development world and a white expression of people thinking that is equated to better. And I just think that is completely wrong. I think it is unfortunate. And I think that if I could encourage anybody out there, I would just say, instead of engaging online in arguments back and forth to try and, think that we're going to make any ground that way or take any new ground that way, to remain curious and maybe pick up, a few books along the way. How to Kill a City by Peter Moskowitz is a great one. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Those are the 2 that I mentioned. There's another one that a lot of people haven't heard of called Trouble I've Seen by Drew Hart. That's a phenomenal book that talks about race relations. And so, yeah, I would say that moving away from a defensive spirit and a more humble posture and the same curiosity that has led to a lot of success in a lot of other areas of life, put that towards what is even more important than making money, which is a better humanity and a better expression of life and love and oneness in our communities.
Amazing. What a great way to end this conversation. Yeah, the idea that we can all be better together, and that this old school model that in order for someone to win, someone else has to lose, right? Like, I
Yeah.
just feel like we are at a point in time where that evolution of defining better, defining success, that those things need to be reimagined, and this is the time to do that. So thank you for being in it so deeply, trying to deal with the complexity of all of this. It's been really amazing for me to experience West Charlotte, to do work with you, and I'm grateful for this conversation.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that I would say is most people that would be listening to this would never run from complex things.
Yeah.
And so we are generally entrepreneurs that run towards problems. And on this one, sometimes running too fast into it and into a conversation may be more detrimental. I would say don't run away from it, run to it, but also there's a lot of really good resources out there that people can start understanding it more, which lead to better conversations. And let's not just ignore this, like let's dig in and see how our businesses can bring economic justice to communities really all across the world.
Amazing. Yes. Agreed. I'm in.
All right.
All right. Thank you, David.
All right. Thanks, Carissa.
Bye.